there was a psychologist or neurologist who thought that the pawns had to do with consciousness. And then recently, self-consciousness has to do with the default mode network. Okay, is there a part of an AI system that has to do with self-consciousness? And also, help me understand even my own terminology when I'm saying the AI system. Are we saying when it's running on the GPU? Are we saying it's the algorithm? Like, what is the AI system that is conscious or that has subjective experience? So where is it?
I guess there's going to be some hardware that's running it. And it's going to be that system that's going to be conscious. That's if something's going to be conscious. Software by itself, it has to be running on something, I would have thought, to be conscious.
What I'm asking is, just like prior there was the pawns that was thought.
I think a good way to think about it is to think about what AI systems are going to be like when they're embodied. So, and we're going to get there quite soon because people are busy trying to build battle robots, which aren't going to be very nice things. But if a battle robot has figured out where you're going to be late at night, that you're going to be in some dark alley by yourself late at night, and it's decided to creep up behind you when you're least expecting it and shoot you in the back of the head, it's perfectly reasonable to talk about what the battle robot believes. And you talk about what the battle robot believes in the same way as you talk about what a person believes. The battle robot might think that if it makes a noise, you'll turn around and see it. And it might really think that in just the way people think it. It might have intentions. It might be intending to creep up behind you and shoot you. So I think what's going to happen is our reluctance to use words like believe and intend and think is going to disappear once these things are embodied. And already it's disappeared to quite a large extent. So if I'm having a conversation with a chatbot and it starts recommending to me things that don't make any sense, and then after a while I figure the chatbot must think I'm a teenage girl. That's why it gives me all these things about makeup and clothes and certain pop groups, boy bands, whatever. And so I asked the chatbot, what demographic do you think I am? And it says, I think you're a teenage girl. When it says, I think you're a teenage girl, we really don't have any doubt that that's what it thinks, right? In normal language, you say, okay, it thought I was a teenage girl. And you wouldn't say, you don't really believe that, okay, it's a bunch of software or neural nets and it acts as if it thinks I'm a teenage girl. You don't say that. It thinks you're a teenage girl. We already use thinks when we're dealing with these systems, even if they don't have hardware associated with them or obvious hardware associated with them. We already use words like thinks and believes. So we're already attributing mental states to them. It's just we have a funny model of a mental state. So we can attribute mental states to them, but have a completely incorrect model of what it is to have a mental state. We think of this inner theatre that's the mind and so on. That's not what having a mental state is.
How much of your concern about AI and its direction would go away if they were not conscious or did not have subjective experience? Is that relevant to it? Does that just accelerate the catastrophe?
I think the importance of that is that it makes most people feel relatively safe. Makes most people think we got something they haven't got or never will have. And that makes us feel much safer and much more special. We're not special and we're not safe. We're certainly not safe because we have subjective experience and they don't. But I think the real problem here is not so much a scientific problem as a philosophical problem, that people misunderstand what is meant by having a subjective experience. I want to give you an example to show that you can use words. You've got a science background, so you probably think you know what the words horizontal and vertical mean. I mean, that's not a problem, right? It's obvious what they mean.
Sure.
And if I show you something, that one's vertical and that one's horizontal, right?
Sure.
Not difficult. So I'll now convince you actually had a wrong model of how they work. Not totally wrong, but there were significant problems, significant incorrectnesses in your model of the terms horizontal and vertical. Okay, here we go. Suppose in my hands I have a whole bunch of little aluminium rods, a large number, and I throw them up in the air. and they tumble and turn and bump into each other. Then suddenly I freeze time. And I ask you, are there more that are within 1 degree of vertical or more within 1 degree of horizontal, or is it about the same?
Say it's approximately the same.
Right, that's what most people say, approximately the same. And they're surprised when I tell you there's about 114 times as many that are within 1 degree of horizontal. That's kind of surprising, right? How did that happen? Well, that's vertical. And this is vertical too. 1 degree of rotational freedom. That's horizontal. And this is horizontal too, but so is this. So horizontal has 2 degrees of freedom. Vertical only has 1 degree of freedom. So here's something you didn't know about horizontal and vertical. Vertical's very special and horizontal's to a penny. That's a bit of a surprise to you. Obviously, it's not like that in 2D, but in 3D, they're very different. And one's very special and the other isn't. So why didn't you know that? Well, I'm going to give you another problem. Suppose in my hands I have a whole bunch of little aluminium discs. And I throw them all up in the air and they tumble and turn and bump into each other. And suddenly I freeze time. Are there more that are within 1 degree of vertical or more that are within 1 degree of horizontal, or is it about the same? No, there's about 114 times as many that are within 1 degree of vertical.
Interesting.
So that's vertical, and this is vertical, and this is vertical.
Yeah.
This is horizontal,
Yes.
and this is horizontal,
Yes.
but it's only got 1 degree of freedom.
Right.
So for planes, horizontal is very special and vertical's to a penny. And for lines, vertical's very special and horizontal's to a penny. So that's just a little example of you have a sort of meta theory of how the words work. And that meta theory can be wrong, even though you use the words correctly. And that's what I'm saying about all these mental state terms like subjective experience of. You can use them correctly, and you can understand what other people mean when they use them. But you have a meta theory of how they work, which is this inner theatre with things made of qualia in them, that's just complete junk.
So what is it then about a theory of percepts or subjective experience that makes it then correct in order for you to say, well, I'm more on the correct track than most people think?
That you think of them as that these subjective experiences, you think they have to be somewhere and they have to be made of something. That neither of those things is true. When I say subjective experience, that's an indicator that I'm now about to talk about a hypothetical state of the world that isn't true. So it isn't anywhere, it's a hypothetical state of the world. But notice the big difference between saying, I'm going to talk about this something that's just hypothetical and isn't actually anywhere, but if it was somewhere, it'd be out there in the world, versus I'm talking about something that's in an inner theatre made of funny stuff. Those are two completely different models. And the model that is in an inner theatre made of funny stuff, I think is just completely wrong, even though it's a model we almost all have.